Hey everyone, so if you're watching this, then my newest album has just been released on Spotify. Now I say newest, but it's actually a remaster of my first album. I decided that there were some issues to fix up with it that I would deal with in the sort of version that comes out on streaming services. So if you want to listen to the old version, that's still available on Bandcamp, and the remaster will be released there. Probably by the time you're watching this, it'll be out. But the new remastered version is sort of what's going to be the big first release onto streaming services. Today, I pretty much just want to talk about, the process of doing that, as well as sort of the process of taking the old versions and fixing up those issues with them. So the original album, is called Undulating Waveforms. It's a sort of compilation album of tracks created during the January challenge of last year, so 2022, which was pretty much my first experiences with the Circuit tracks, which I have here. And a lot of the music ended up just being one pattern looped over and over with no variation and even very minimal like filtering or volume automation to make it feel like there's movement. So they were very repetitive and they weren't short either. So primarily, there were two options here. I could either keep them at a similar length to maintain that sort of full-length album timing, but have to add a bunch of sections to each of them to make them feel a bit more like a reasonable song, or I could just shorten them. And I wanted to stick with the original character and sort of the songwriting behind the original songs, due to the fact that it was for a challenge, so I wanted to stay as faithful to what I came up with originally without straying too far from it by writing new sections. So I didn't write anything new. I made a few changes. I added in extra instruments to existing parts, especially a few more drums, just to build up so that there can be a bit more change in intensity, adding more than was there before to make it go higher, and then taking away more to make it go much softer at different points within each track. And then I pretty much just made them shorter. So rather than writing whole new sections, I just made small additions in terms of the sort of overall sound, but I didn't actually write any new sections. So I've just kept that as it was and just shortened it down. So I think the arrangement here in the new versions is a lot more reasonable. And also, of course, it's a remaster, because another big issue was the mastering. Now, I don't know anything about mastering. I won't even pretend to. But I do know that one of the big ideas is to make sure that the loudness level is somewhat reasonable across the board. I don't know if I've done great this time, but I know I've done better than I did before. It was pretty bad before. But as well as remastering, they're also just remixed, I guess, even though remix kind of means something else. But literally, I've redone the mixing on these tracks. So I have the Circuit tracks here. As you can see, I'll probably zoom in a little bit. So this is the first track on the album. It's called Skateboarding in LA. This is kind of the main looping section of it. So not a lot has changed here. This one was very well written from the start in terms of, especially in comparison to the other ones. It's there's a lot of sections, so you have this sort of broken down section, then it goes into the big full section, and then there's this sort of verse which plays twice, like you'd imagine a verse would, and then we bring in hi-hats, and then there's also a sort of solo section. So there is enough sort of structure here to make it work as a full song. So there wasn't a lot of arrangement changes. I think it did end up being a little bit shorter than the original, but not by a massive amount. So then we move on to the mixing side of things, where I have changed a little bit. I've done a little bit more panning around just with the drum elements as well. You won't hear that right now. I'm recording it in mono so that I can have the mic going into one side of the audio interface here. But believe me, on the album version, you can hear the drums are panning around a bit more. And on some tracks, I am live playing the panning of different things. So that adds a little bit more interest in some of the tracks. But I've also just changed the mix. One of the general rules, and I get this from Gabe Miller, the hi-hats are always too loud. So, not anymore. They used to be very loud, I'll admit, around there. So even something like that could be okay, but I turn them down even further. So that's about it for the first track. Not a massive amount of change here, just mostly focusing on the mixing side of things. And I'm not going to run through all of the tracks, but I will run through a couple just to sort of cover all my points. So the next track, number 2, and then number 3. These two were not too bad originally, like they were very repetitive, but they were at least not too long. This song, however, number 4, was like the worst offender. Because that's it. All that happens is filtering changes, and they are automated, which I'm surprised I knew how to do at the time I wrote these songs. But yeah, there's very, very minimal sort of arrangement here. And it was like a 5-minute long song, or something, like maybe 4.5, but still ridiculous. So I cut it down a lot here. As with all the others, I kept it completely faithful to the original. I just pretty much had to cut down the length significantly. So that number 4 track was called Glide. Let's move back into number 2 here. So I did add a few things here. So this snare drum that you're hearing, or like this sort of clap percussive sound, I added this in. And there's that little sort of, it's not delayed, it's sequenced in with velocity falling down, but it creates a delay sound. At the same time that there's that big hit on that hi-hat sound. So that's a little bit of change in the drum pattern. Again, just as an opportunity to create some more intensity shifts. And then the same sort of synth sound comes in, and then we bring in the bass. The arrangement, again, the different sections that there are, again, very similar to the original. In this one, pretty much the only big change was that snare drum, but I think it actually goes a long way to creating a little bit more interest, and it actually does make it sound a lot less static, in my opinion. So the last track I'm going to talk about, not because anything changed, just because I really like it, is the last one on the album, track 7. This is called I Lost My Orb. Don't even ask. And it starts off with this really soft ambient opening. And I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's about a minute of just chords playing. And then these quiet drums come in. And then we get this. And then it actually switches into a different project, which is a way to expand things when there's different scenes or automation has to happen. And it pretty much comes into this new project, which is where things start to get a little bit bigger. Then we do this sort of filter transition into this big section with this synth. All of this is on one synth sound here, so the sort of lower tones as well as the melody are on one sound. And you'll see why we need to save the synth 2 for something else shortly. That's why. So this is a sort of chip tune, square wave sound here. So that's why we saved the other synth there. So it kind of comes in on its own as a very abrupt transition out of the chorus. And then there's also this weird little, I think this would be considered polymetric. I never know the difference between polyrhythm and polymeter, but I'm pretty sure this would be considered polymetric. But just take a listen. So it's pretty much a bass. It's kind of a middle range actually on the synth. It's playing in 15. And the drums are playing in 16, which means that in order to make it line up, we have to either go through 15 of loops of the drum pattern or 16 loops of the synth pattern. And of course, that adds up to the same amount of beats. It's just a choice of which one is easier to like feel along with when you're counting out the bars. So I always go with the synth, and I just have to count on my hands 16 times because, you know, it's well and truly too many to just feel when there's this much sort of offbeat rhythms going on. It's way too high to just feel it. And, it's like when playing live, it doesn't matter too much. If you mess it up, no one really cares. In fact, I'd probably prefer to not just hear the same repetitive thing for that long. But for the recorded version, at least, I just sat here counting 16 loops of the synth pattern until I got up to the right point and I transitioned back into the chorus. So that is kind of the last track I wanted to talk about. Again, no significant changes here. As always, a little bit of mixing, and of course, it's never going to sound completely faithful to the original because I have to live play it. That's just the way the Circuit Tracks is. I have to live play everything. I have to live trigger things. If I want to do filter movements, I have to do them by hand. You can automate things on this, but honestly, it's way more fun and honestly easier to just do it live if you sort of know the song well enough to just do it. But yeah, that's about it that I want to talk about in terms of, the process of getting this all going. And doing the mixing, arranging, etc. to fix up the old versions of these tracks. So, hello again. I'm going to talk now just a little bit about the actual process of getting these songs onto your favorite streaming platforms. So, probably not really a surprise to anyone, but I'm using DistroKid to release my music. This is kind of the standard for independent musicians. Of course, there are a lot of options, but I just went with it because, it is just the standard choice. This is my album art. It's an AI-generated piece that was created by someone on the Magpie Pirates Discord server. From time to time, people create free album art, and the person who made this created quite a lot. He's actually released a, might I say, very, very good album, which I will link down below. It's genuinely one of my favorite albums of, my limited amount of albums I've listened to. The songs are all uploaded here, so basically the process was just to record them into my audio interface, use my DAW to export them, and of course I just did a little bit of compression and just getting the volumes right within my DAW, and then I just exported them out, upload them in here, enter all the details. I put 2023 remaster as like sort of the special information on all of these, and then the stores that it's on, I just selected them all because I see no reason not to. Not really a massive amount to mention here actually, but pretty much just wanted to mention DistroKid is what I'm using. So I think that pretty much sums up the process I used to get this album remastered, recorded, and then out to your favorite platforms. So that's pretty much going to sum up this video. I have 1 minute left of recording time on my camera, so we'll make this quick. Thank you very much for watching. If you in any way have been, inspired to release your own music or whatever, please do consider leaving a like on the video and perhaps subscribing to my channel. I was going to say for more content like this, but I don't exactly talk about DistroKid in every video. That would get a bit repetitive. But as you might imagine, I make a lot of music, and this is where you can watch it. So if you feel like subscribing, that would be great. If you have any comments, feedback, suggestions, etc., leave them in the comment section down below. And other than that, that's really it. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.